as well. But then that goes to the chicken and egg. They will only continue doing this, we fear, if they see market opportunity, if other investors, if other capital providers are giving them capital to invest with a gender lens. So it's really incumbent upon the capital providers to write the checks to these fund managers so that they are incentivized to make these kinds of investments. Okay.
Thank you. I think I noted 4 questions. On the first one, first in the audience, I saw some colleagues from the central bank who are actually from the monetary sector. So I will let them note your comment on the low and stable inflation environment. But on the agriculture, and I think I will answer as well your question about the pilot about this, because I will be remiss if I don't mention this. This is actually an undertaking that the BSP is doing with the Asian Development Bank on developing pilots for agriculture value chain financing. And our objective here is to crowd in private sector financing to organize agricultural value chains. So what we saw is that many government agencies, agriculture, agrarian reform, science and technology, trade and investment, are working on strengthening value chains, agricultural value chains, and providing support, providing infrastructure. But when we looked at the private financing that was going into these chains, there was hardly any private money. At best, it was the government bank that was providing some financing. So this is one example of a way policymaker in a central bank is sort of enabling and advocating for certain aspects. And one approach is this pilot wherein we're working with these chains and identifying banks to pilot an agriculture value chain financing facility. And we're working with the ADB on this. And we already have expressions of interest from rural banks to join and really develop the expertise to provide financing by looking at the entire value chain, which is, I think, lacking in terms of expertise within our current banking system. So that's one. The second question was on lowering the cost of microcredit. Here I've been seeing some gains that have arisen from 2 things. One is really the transparency and disclosure. So we have in the Philippines a law that mandates disclosure of effective interest rate, and the Bangko Sentral has taken it upon itself to create really the clarity on how fees are supposed to be disclosed, what kind of information should be out there very clearly. And this goes for all credit granting entities, not just those that are supervised by the BSP. So that has shown some, but not yet very significant, but some effect on really giving the market some comparison in terms of disclosure. And the second we are hoping is really the use of technology. So just a couple of months ago, we went to a microfinance institution that was already employing agents and using a mobile app, and not only lowering costs but also expanding their reach. So we're hoping that technology, while minding the consumer protection aspect, will really also drive the costs down. The third question was on supervisory reports. I shared our experience earlier about sex disaggregated data and our decision for microfinance to take it out because our consideration was the cost of compliance and the information we were getting. So basically we were seeing, okay, 99% women, what then? So really in terms of collecting, we have to be more deliberate in asking the question so that it's data that we can use and not just, okay, 99 versus 1% men. So right now, we don't have requirements for sex disaggregated data, but we are thinking about it in certain key policy initiatives for inclusion, like our agent banking regulations. We're looking at our electronic payments reports to see whether we can incorporate it there. I think there we can really find rich information. Another one is that we are going live next year on a chatbot for consumer complaints and inquiries. And I think this will be a wealth of data that we will get in terms of customer experience and in terms of, there we can also disaggregate in terms of experiences of women and men in accessing financial services. We will be employing an AI machine learning platform for this chatbot, and we will see that we'll get a lot of information. So I guess what I'm highlighting is that technology might make it easier for us to get information. So we're also using APIs for supervisory reports. So maybe the compliance structure will change in terms of when we need to make that balance of what data will we get and how much will it cost both the bank and the submitting entity in terms of collecting and gathering it. But key is really asking what data do we need and what data can we use. The fourth on consumer protection, thank you, Keiko, for raising that. Again, I will be remiss if I don't raise it. That's really the other side of the coin of the work that we are doing. For the Bangko Sentral, we've actually just issued our new circular on the financial consumer protection framework, where we highlight now digital financial services as well. So the responsibilities of institutions and protecting customers when it comes to these innovative platforms. But on the advocacy side, we're actually working with the fintechs and also the key digital players in a consumer centricity campaign. And here we are looking at digital literacy and really looking at the needs and capacities of the consumer. We think that together with a good enforcement of the financial consumer protection will hope to address some of those risks consumer protection risks associated with innovation. So I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Super, thank you. And we're just on our last minute, so I'll let Alison have the last word on behalf of the panel.
Oh, certainly. And I can see it blinking at me, so I know we're done. But I guess quickly, so I'll start with the second question around lowering the cost of microfinance. If you think about sort of what makes microfinance expensive, it's the transaction cost of getting out to the field. It's the fact that it's unsecuritized, so the risk that you bear there, as well as the cost of capital for microfinance institutions that are unable to accept deposits. If you think about each one of those, you can start to squeeze that to bring down the cost, but the reality is I think that microfinance is expensive because it's expensive to run. One thing that we're doing to really try to look at how to improve operational efficiencies, which could have an inadvertent effect in terms of cost of borrowing, is to really help microfinance institutions to modernize and to digitize their processes, whether it's the distribution of payment, whether it's the collection of payment, whether it's the using AI in terms of helping to better understand who your customers are, making better lending decision making. All of those are things to help modernize microfinance institutions, which again, perhaps could touch on cost of borrowing, but it's an indirect benefit. Around agriculture, we are very interested in agriculture. We've been piloting in about 4 countries in Africa and India as well, a platform to help bring smallholder farmers, cooperatives, closer to the end buyers to cut out some of those intermediaries who do not provide sufficient value. And I think one of the things to make certain you hear in that statement is some intermediaries do provide value. There's a reason why they're there. The question is do all of them need to be there? Because what happens is it erodes the income that farmers actually get. And so how do you start to think about streamlining that? And quite frankly, shifting the purchasing power, right? So that you go from smallholder farmers having the least amount of power in that equation to be having collective bargaining power so that they're able to command better prices. And we're just now starting to explore that. Do we have something that's tested, ready to roll out and scale? Not yet. And I guess one thing that I just want to touch on that Pia had mentioned and Keiko had asked was around consumer protection. So we think consumer protection is clearly important. I would flip it though and think, so it's not financial literacy, because we know sort of after decades and decades of trying to do financial literacy that it's a complete failure, right? That at the end of the day, nobody wants to learn about savings if you're worried about putting food on your table tonight, right? Like, it just feels abstract and academic. But to Pia's point around how do you start to marry financial education and empowerment of people to make economic decisions or financial decisions at that moment when they need to make that decision, then it becomes highly relevant. Then all of a sudden, I want that information because I need to decide today, do I take out that microfinance loan or do I go with a fintech? Actually, what is going to work best for me? And so there's a level of transparency and consumer protection that's required, but there's also an element of how do we start to inject information so that consumers can make real decisions in real time in a way that really benefits them. With that, I'll stop.
Wonderful. So the applause was definitely warranted. So let's give it to them. I don't know about you, but I learned an absolute, I nearly said a very Australian word, heap. I learned a heap. No, I learned a lot, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much to our panel and to our fantastic audience on a Monday morning, and for your questions, and for our DG and the other ADB VPs in the room. We appreciate your support and for joining us today. So thank you a lot, everybody.
Love you.